I can fix him. This phrase has been around for as long as villains have existed. There is always an evil guy that can be fixed, the monster who secretly has a heart, the proverbial bad boy that can be rehabilitated using the power of love. This trope has spanned across the world of fiction and found its way into the world of anime, with there being several incredibly villainous male characters that have landed at the top of many otaku's hear me out lists. If you haven't seen my previous video on this subject about female characters that you can't fix, feel free to check out that video in the description down below. I promise to follow up to that video involving male characters you can't fix, and you guys are getting exactly what you asked for. My name is Luke, and this is my channel where I give my lukewarm takes on anime, manga, and more, and my lukewarm take about these anime characters is that you absolutely cannot in any way, shape, or form fix them. To start, we have this guy. You know what? He might be a little bit too heavy to start with, so why don't we begin with something a little on the light side. Light Yagami's descent into madness was as quick as it was saddening to watch. It took him a few weeks to basically become a narcissistic sociopath hell-bent on world domination and declare himself God. Death Note has always been a story about the temptation of power and how it corrupts the soul. This is why I won't be talking about Light Yagami without the context of the Death Note, because we wouldn't really be talking about Light Yagami or Kira that the true story is about. Light is inseparable from that cursed book and the Shinigami that follows him. Even when they were separated from one another during the memory loss arc, it was all just a ploy to evade suspicion from L. One way or another, Light will get his book back and become Kira once more. This is why I don't really consider Light to be truly Light without the Death Note. The reason that Light becomes unfixable once he picked up that book is the fact that he stops considering other people around him as people, but more like NPCs in the story of his life. This self-aggrandizing mentality is fairly common in those with narcissistic personality disorder, which Light Yagami demonstrates several facets of. It's pretty safe to say that the guy who continuously refers to himself as God and thinks of everyone around him as pawns in his 4D chess game with his emo boyfriend to be a little bit of a narcissist. Narcissism is pretty much his biggest trait, as it dictates where Light's character progresses. Light, for pretty much the entire story, never considers himself to be villainous or evil in any way, and continuously justifies his behavior by claiming his new world will be free from evil, with him being the judge, jury, and executioner. Due to his high sense of self-importance, convincing Light that he is doing anything wrong, even when presented with clear evidence that he hurts innocent people, would do nothing to sway him from his goal. From Light's perspective, he is God, and he decides moral righteousness. Therefore, anyone who opposes him is evil and therefore deserving of Kira's divine judgment. And he reaches this point fairly quickly in the story. In fact, by episode 2, Light was willing to end the life of someone who he thought was L just to assert his dominance. He chose to write Lynn L. Taylor's name in the book, a man he believed was the world's greatest detective, a man who solves cases and saves lives, just to feed the bottomless pit that is his ego. And of course, this decision inevitably cost him everything, since it led the real L right to him. As if being a narcissistic sociopath with an ego rivaling Homelander wasn't bad enough, the way he treats his potential love interests is another key facet to consider. Light has never demonstrated 1 ounce of genuine love or affection to any of his female companions. Again, the only thing he really cares about is his mission to conquer the world as Kira and being on top of coming on top of L, coming out on top against L in their battle of wits. It's no secret that Light and L's relationship has a lot of romantic subtext behind it, but if you just consider Light's canonical romantic relationships, he doesn't really seem really interested in anyone. He gets more turned on by the idea of winning than any amount of beautiful women throwing themselves at him. Fixing him using the power of love is not really something that is possible, because the only thing Light is capable of loving is himself. Much like how Makima from Chainsaw Man would treat you, Light would use you until you stop being useful and dispose of you accordingly. His two canonical love interests, Misa Amane and Kiyomi Takeda, would give you a pretty good idea of how a relationship with him would turn out. Takeda's ended up in flames while Misa decided that she couldn't live in a world without light because it would be too dark. I will admit, while Light Yagami isn't fixable after he picks up that book, the light without the death note is a pretty good catch. He's smart, successful, attractive, and kind. However, the course of fate decided to turn him into Kira, and it was inevitable. And speaking of inevitable, the next person on our list is also a victim of fate, albeit this time it was a fate of his own design. Let's talk about Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan. Mikasa and Armin spent 48 chapters and 35 episodes plus 2 one-hour-long specials trying to fix Eren, and all it got them was 80% of their planet turned into pancakes. Unlike Light Yagami, Eren's story was rigged from the start by himself in an endless loop of misery. How messed up is Eren, you ask? Well, do you remember that inciting event in episode 1 where his mother was trapped under rubble and became a snack for his dad's ex-wife? The incident that put Eren on the revenge path for the rest of his eternal existence? The linchpin of the entire story? Well, as it turns out, it was Eren himself who caused all of it to happen. He forced his own mother to be eaten, which would fuel his rage at Titans and eventually at Marley, which would cause everything else in the story to subsequently happen. Without that incident or that anger, Eren would not have been crazy enough to do the things that he does in the rest of the series. What sets Eren aside from all of the other people on this list is that he isn't a manipulator or a pure evil sociopath, but rather deep down he is a scared child who was tasked with solving the problem of discrimination. Unfortunately for 80% of humanity, his solution to ending racism is that no one can be racist if there's no one left to be racist. We see countless examples highlighting how much Eren doesn't want to do the rumbling, but yet he has to because he was already on that course set in motion by himself. Eren is his own victim and he never had a choice. It's a pretty confusing concept because Eren was the one who made Eren do all the things that Eren did. But at the same time, he can't change the path that he already set for himself. Imagine you are playing through a new save file on a video game, but your actions are dictated by the last playthrough and your game controller just stops working. Another reason that Eren is a unique character on this list, and unfortunately why you can't fix him, is because he is doing everything out of love. He loves Armin and especially loves Mikasa so much that he is willing to sacrifice his own mother and the rest of the world just to guarantee their safety. His plan to make himself the villain of humanity just so that his friends could be the saviors of humanity was done out of pure love, and it was the best plan he could come up with in his near infinite time in the past. In order to fix Eren, you would have to find a better way to solve the predicament that he was in. Armin, who is arguably the smartest character in the entire story, couldn't figure out a solution either, but knew that Eren tried his best. I'm sure that there could have been some solution out there, some way to get out of their situation and guarantee the safety of both Paradis and the rest of the world without pressing the nuclear button. But as mentioned before, Eren is a scared child. Deep down, he is still that kid who watched his mom get devoured, and every decision he's made since then has been driven by fear, hatred, and love for those that he has left. I believe that if you gave Armin enough time in the past, he would have figured out a solution, but Armin wasn't the one in that position. He was not the one with that responsibility. It was Eren. Therefore, Eren was on a fixed path, and why he himself could not be fixed. Attack on Titan is a beautiful story that outlines the consequences of war and hatred. Those consequences came in the form of Eren Yeager. Since the beginning of the story, Eren's war never stopped, even before he knew who the true enemies were. That brief bit of respite that he got with Mikasa in that log cabin was the closest that Eren ever got to being fixed. We could see just how much he wanted to live the rest of his days out in that reality, but it would mean Armin and everyone else would meet their end by Marley eventually. So to Eren, there was only one thing to do, one path to follow, one mission to carry out, no matter how horrifying, soul-crushing, or evil it was. To Eren, the rumbling was the only solution to an impossible problem. And so you can't fix Eren Yeager, because in order to do so, you would need to fix war itself, fix hatred itself. You would need to rewrite the countless centuries of pain that started when Ymir let those pigs out of the pen and kickstarted everything. Eren was designed to be the final symptom from the disease that is war, and unfortunately, I just don't think anyone is capable of curing that. Okay, with Eren out of the way, I think it's time for me to finally talk about Griffith and why you can't fix him. Anyway, so Ryumen Sukuna is the final antagonist of the hit series Jujutsu Kaisen and the right subject to put in this section of the video because that's what I want to do right now. Sukuna is the subject of way too many bad boy thirst traps on TikTok. To this day, I do not see the appeal for Sukuna. Like Toji Fujiguro, I can totally see. And Toji is definitely an example of a fixable villain because Megumi's mom managed to fix him for a little bit before he learned what fatherhood meant. But Sukuna, the literal embodiment of evil and pain in the JJK world, the guy whose entire existence subsists on obliterating people until he finds someone who can satiate his hunger for battle, this guy is your hear me out? That sounds more like a cry for help, a help me out if you will. Ryumen Sukuna, as I've mentioned in previous videos, is more akin to a walking hurricane, a natural disaster that is there to ruin everyone's day. There is a reason that whenever Sukuna is released and Gojo isn't around, the body count is going to rise. The only thing Sukuna is capable of in his entire existence is battle and destruction. He only seeks strength and sees anything weaker than him as being beneath him. The only other living being that he even tolerates is Uraume, and I don't think that Uraume wants to fix Sukuna as much as they want Sukuna to take them into his malevolent kitchen and expand their domain, if you catch my drift. The ironic thing about putting Sukuna on this list is that Sukuna was seemingly redeemed by the end of JJK, so yeah, he was fixed. And spoilers ahead if you haven't read the ending of JJK yet. When Sukuna was ultimately defeated, he admitted that his philosophy and way of life was wrong and that he could have chosen to be a better person. For the entirety of the story, Sukuna talked about himself like he has no choice but to end lives and destroy things, but in that final chapter, he admits that he had a choice, that he could have not been the monster that he was. He even says that if he reincarnates, he would have changed how he lived and be a good person. This is absolute proof that you can fix Sukuna, right? Well, do you know what it took to get Sukuna to that point of self-actualization and introspection? He had to be defeated first. Sukuna only listens to strength, and his life philosophy before his defeat was that strength determines all objective truth. Since no one in history has ever beaten him, no one could ever refute his philosophy or change him for the better. And do you know what it took in order to defeat Sukuna? In order to fix him? It took basically the entirety of the remaining Jujutsu society, a fully awakened Maki Zenin who was on par with Toji Fujiguro, a special grade sorcerer Yuta Okotsu, My Goat Toto, and the indomitable power of Yuji Itadori landing more black flashes than Steph Curry lands 3-pointers. Oh, and I forgot to mention, it took a super amped Satoru Gojo fighting to his death just to weaken him enough for everyone else to hit him with the Jump Jutsu Kaisen. So yeah, you can fix Sukuna provided that you can beat him, which is something that took the entirety of Jujutsu Society to barely accomplish, so good luck with that. Okay, now that that villain is out of the way, I can finally talk about him, even though I truly do not want to. The guy who launched 1,000 rage-filled screams. The man who redefined the meaning of the word evil. The Hawk of Light himself. Let's finally talk about Griffith from Berserk. There are certainly characters that are more depraved than Griffith and commit arguably worse atrocities in the story than Griffith does. However, it's the impact of his actions and the philosophy behind them that makes him truly irredeemable and, for the purposes of this video, unfixable. Berserk is a story that is relentless in its brutality, and the characters experience some of the most horrific things imaginable. What makes its horror all the more terrifying and impactful is just how human all of the cruelty that takes place feels. The characters of Berserk all live in a world where the supernatural exists, but most of the pain that is inflicted upon them are surprisingly human. The things that we see happen to Guts, Casca, and even Griffith are things that we know still happen to this day, done to people by people. The late and great Kentaro Miura masterfully balances the fantasy with the grim reality to build such a painful climax to the Golden Age arc. And on that road to achieve that climax, we slowly but surely understand why we can't fix Griffith. Griffith is cursed by his own ambition. He was raised on the streets with less than nothing, and the only thing keeping him alive was his obsession with getting his own castle, his own kingdom, and eventually his own wings. Much like Light Yagami, Griffith displays a sense of narcissism, believing himself to be better than everyone else. This was mostly because he was correct. He was extremely capable, and no one else could ever hope to challenge him in wits, in beauty, or even in strength. This talent and ambition carried him closer and closer towards his goal, towards his castle, and unfortunately for everyone else, he was willing to walk over as many corpses as he needed to in order to achieve it. Once he obtained that Crimson Behelit, he was set on a path that nothing and no one could stop. Even though he may show signs that he appreciates the company of the others, ultimately Griffith saw them as people who were drawn in by his charisma and attached themselves to his ambition. Therefore, he believed that he could just use them as he saw fit to get his castle. Griffith, of course, never considered anyone in the Band of Hawk to be his friend, since he states that he believes a friend is someone who is his equal, and to him, no one could be equal to Griffith. No one, of course, except for Guts. Guts' devotion to his sword and his absolutely unrelenting spirit is something that overpowered Griffith's dream of his castle. We saw this when Guts defeated Griffith in their duel and left the Band of Hawk. No one has ever defied Griffith before, and no one was ever able to overcome his ambition until Guts. This broke Griffith. He was already egotistical and detached from humanity before, but now, because his narcissism was disproved by Guts, he lost any inhibition he ever had. And so he took advantage of the king's daughter, which landed him in the dungeons, which broke him even further. When Guts returned to rescue Griffith with the Band of the Hawk, he was hanging on to his 1% health, barely even being fit to be called a living being. The only thing that was keeping Griffith alive, again, was his dream of obtaining that castle. And when the opportunity came, he did not hesitate for a single second. The eclipse was the culmination of Griffith's ambition and demonstrates who he is and who he has always been. This is who Griffith is. Before he became Femto, he was always a monster who would do anything and hurt anyone just to achieve his goal. He believes that everyone exists to serve his purpose of achieving that goal. And so he sacrificed all of them. Every single member of the Band of the Hawk. All of the people that followed him, that saved his life, and who worshipped him. They were nothing to him but fodder, stepping stones to reach his castle. I want to make it clear that Griffith would have done this even without Guts leaving or his not so delicious time in that dungeon. Sure, Guts leaving and his subsequent trip to the Gulag expedited some deep-seated depravity, but everything Griffith does during the eclipse, he does out of his own volition. And as much as I don't want to talk about this final moment, it is important because it is the final nail in the coffin cementing Griffith as absolutely irredeemable and completely unfixable. After achieving his ascension, getting his castle, and everything his ambition ever drove him to desire, Griffith takes Casca, the woman he knows trusted him and loved him, And, well, I don't have to tell any of you what Griffith does to Kasuga because all of you know by this point, even if you haven't read Berserk. It is one of the most evil actions ever done by an anime character in history. He does this in front of a helpless and powerless Guts, who he knows loves Kasuga and trusted him with all of his heart. This act didn't lead him to his castle since he already achieved it. Neither Guts nor Kasuga were threats to him in any way, and they were absolutely at his mercy. He also didn't choose to end their lives, but chose to do that to Kasuga and make Guts watch. He did all of this because he enjoyed it. He wanted to punish Guts for leaving him, for daring to challenge his ambition, and to show him how much more superior he was to Guts. It was as if Griffith was trying to prove to himself that Guts was never on his level, which he knew deep down he was, and that Guts was the only person who ever shook him in his entire life. This brazen display of narcissism and brutality for the sake of proving a point redefines the definition of the word evil. Griffith embodies that word. He is evil. He represents the evil of humanity itself. There is no fixing Griffith because in order to fix him, you would need to end humanity's capacity for evil as a whole, and that's just simply not possible. Whew, okay, I did not want to end the video on such a heavy tone, but what can you expect from the story of Berserk? As much of a downer ending as it was, I couldn't think of a better example to end this specific video on other than Griffith. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and feel free to let me know in the comments down below if you would like more content like this from me. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time with some more lukewarm takes.